Hey guys, so this is the latest iteration of the tank that I set up for the Aquatic Experience nanoscaping contest. I'm going to show you what that was like participating in a contest was like, and also everything I did to make this happen. Coming right.
Watching Pecktec on YouTube. Peace.
Okay, so today's story is a little bit longer than normal, and just to help you guys out, I've included this time code so you can skip to the parts you want to see or watch it all the way through. Hey YouTube, this is Pecktec, and a few weeks ago I went to the Aquatic Experience and participated in the nanoscaping contest. Now the nanoscaping contest is a little bit different than the contest I entered earlier in the year. Earlier in the year I went to the big fish deal, and I had a tank that I prepared entirely at home basically and went and reset up over there. And I had a lot more control over all the elements of it. Obviously it's covered in wood. Now the way this works is you pay a $100 entry fee, and they give you a Fluval Flora sized aquarium. This is like an 8-gallon aquarium or something like that. And previously they were sold in the Fluval Flora and the Fluval EB. They have this they're kind of square, but they have a curved front panels right here. And they're really, really nice. I have a number of these tanks that I've set up already on this channel. So aside from practicing with some materials I had at home with an old version of one of these tanks, there really isn't much you can do. You have to bring all your stuff there and set it up. And of course the custom piece of hardscape in the back, the face, you'll remember that from a video made a couple of weeks ago about my DIY resin ornaments or something like that. Okay, so I found this foam head form at a craft store, and I took a heat knife and decided just to cut it in half because I really didn't need that extra space in there. The heat knife works really well with foam. Of course, it just melts right through it, and I just used the seam as my guide, and then I pulled it apart. At that point, we measured the box to kind of get an idea for how much of the molding material we'd need, and I used some epoxy to adhere the face to a little piece of cardboard so it'd be easily pulled out. I stuck the face down inside of the box, and then we started mixing up the material that we needed for the mold. This is the same material we used before. It's kind of a liquid base to liquid and powder, and you mix it up as good as you can, and then you just pour it in. Then you don't have to wait very long. Now this mold ended up probably not being the best stuff to use, and we'll find out why later on. It ended up molding okay, and just after a few minutes it turns into this kind of like pinkish pancake. And I just peeled that little cardboard box with the face on it right off there, and we had a nice little mold that we could use. Now after we got the mold out, we filled it with water just so we could get an idea for exactly how much of the resin material we were going to need. Now what I'm doing right there is I'm putting a piece of foam in, and the intention is to leave a void. So I want to fill this up with resin, but put this piece of foam in there so I could have sort of a void so I could plant in the top of the head. And that'll just keep me from having so much resin to cut away later. Afterwards, I removed as much of the water as I could with a cup, and then we just kind of toweled it off there. And we gave it a quick spray with some quick release stuff so that maybe we could use the mold again. Afterwards, my father mixed up the 1-to-1 mixture of the acrylic resin with no color or anything like that in there, and we poured it in. This stuff gets really hot, and it takes a while to actually cure, but you can usually see about how good or bad it is within 5 or 10 minutes, but man, it is just, the chemical reaction is really, really hot. In fact, it melted the styrofoam to some degree, but it didn't end up causing any damage or looking really weird, but the styrofoam did kind of melt into it, and it was kind of interesting. Now, one thing we weren't expecting was this strange crust all over the face. We were expecting it to look more like the back there, where it'd be kind of transparent all the way through, so we decided to dry the mold off and try it again, and this time I tried it without any styrofoam in the mix, but we ended up with pretty much the same thing. In fact, we tried this several times, and we were really baffled. We had no idea why we were getting that white stuff on the face, and it was just kind of a weird white crust where we were expecting it to be real transparent. We thought maybe there's a lot of moisture inside of this particular type of mold, and that could be the cause of it. But we tried several times, so we kept getting the same result over and over. Just this kind of weird white crusty face. Now, because the face was kind of strange and a little bit deformed, I decided to take the Dremel tool and see what I could do with it. And I reformed the lips, actually made some lips on there, and I took out some of the really rougher edges and cleaned up the little part at the top. Also cleared out the eyes and stuff so they'd be transparent, and got a nice base for which to work on. Then I pulled out the rock that I was going to try to emulate. I wanted this face to match that as much as possible, and I found this stuff called well, when I played Warhammer 40K, it was called green stuff, and it's basically an epoxy resin. And I've got this cool little tool here to help work on it too, and some water. You always want to have some water when you're working with this stuff because it gets really, really sticky. But basically the way the ribbon works is you pull it out and you take the two colors and you knead them together kind of like Play-Doh. And once you knead them together, they end up turning into this sort of green color, and that's when you know that you've got a good mixture and it's ready to work with. This stuff is super, super sticky, and the real trick to working with it is to constantly keep your fingers wet, any tools or anything that you're using wet. Now, I had an idea when I started this I thought would be really interesting, and that was just to take the rocks and almost use them like a mold. So I took the rocks and I just kind of pressed them into it. So I would put a little bit of the green stuff on, take the rock and just kind of work it in there, like see if I could emulate the texture of the rocks. This didn't end up working super great. It worked pretty good for a nice thin texture, and but a lot of times also I would just use my tool and other things to kind of put it on there. But the rock was a real quick way to kind of get a nice texture on there. So I worked a lot with the face, and I worked up basically an outer layer of green stuff pretty much all over it. And then I let the green stuff sit for a night and harden up. And then I went back the next day for another layer, and I really thickened it up and tried to make it look as much like that rock as I could. Of course, the next thing I did was I primed it all red. That was going to be the darkest color I wanted it to see. And then I went ahead and I pulled out some acrylic paint, and it was time to paint this thing up and make it look as much like that rock as possible. So I'd mix the color up and I'd just kind of compare it to the rock, and I'd try to get it as close as possible. When I started getting close, I decided just to start layering it up. I basically did like sort of a wet brush at first, and then more and more of a dry brush technique where I just kind of get a little bit of paint on there and move it over the surface, and I layered it up. So I layered it up from the darkest to the brightest, and I just kept painting like that until I got it to match the rocks as much as possible. This ended up taking several layers, and of course, you know, the last layer was the brighter colors, and with those I barely had any paint on the brush, and I just kind of bring it across the top, you know, the raised areas and stuff like that, and it really gives it a lot of depth when you paint it that way. The final product, I thought, came out really well. I was really happy with it. Now, after I peeled the tape off the eyes and stuff, I decided to experiment with some LED lights that I'd had, and they were really, really interesting. It's just kind of this coil of LED lights. You can change the colors and stuff, and because the inside of this is translucent, it made a really, really interesting glow to the eyes. Eyes are one thing that if I tried to paint them on, probably would have looked really bad, so I really wanted them to glow and give it that really supernatural, alive feeling. Now, prior to going to Chicago, I pulled a bunch of plants that I've been storing away for quite a while, actually a couple of weeks or more, in different little areas around my tanks. I packed all of it in Tupperware, along with some other supplies and a bunch of different kinds of buckets and just water change things and different kind of things that I might need, as well as all the hardscape. They provided me with some of the substrate that I used, but I brought a little bit of that myself too. So on Thursday, while I was helping the My Aquarium Box guys set up, I got to go back in there and peep at them setting up the aquariums, and I couldn't believe how many there were. I mean, it's just this huge row of nanoscapes. It was pretty exciting. Fluval provided a bunch of stuff, okay, with tongs and scissors and an Aqua Clear 20 and a little mat. Now the lights in all the tanks are pretty interesting. There was some sort of prototype light, and I was playing with the color temperature and everything on the app and stuff. One of the moderators was showing me how to do that. Those lights aren't quite ready for market yet, so they sent us home with some of these, and you'll see this set up in probably my next video. It's pretty awkward, like working in such tight quarters, you know, with all these other people, but it was pretty neat too. All right, so I'm about to head in. I've got all my stuff there ready for the aquascaping contest. It starts in like 5 minutes. I'm real nervous. There's a lot of really good competition out there. I'm looking forward to seeing what people bring. But so what we're gonna do now, I'm not gonna be able to vlog a lot. I'm gonna shoot periodically as much as I can of the setup. Yeah, but like I said, this thing starts in just a few minutes. It's time to go inside and really take a look around and see what's up. It's a really huge event. It's really cool. I'm already seeing a bunch of YouTubers, a bunch of viewers that said hello. That's pretty cool, I gotta say. But let's go in here and take a look. I learned pretty early on with this tank that I was going to need to attach that face to the back of the aquarium, but there wasn't going to be enough time for silicone to like really make a permanent bond, and I wasn't ready to commit permanently to the placement of that face like I would if I was really siliconing it on, so I used a glue gun. Now glue gun and water really don't mix. I mean, water pretty much will instantly deactivate it, but I was able to I got a position with a rock, had the glue gun to kind of help keep it in place, and I did it in circles. So hopefully the first layer would like protect the inner layers for a little while, and then so on and so on and so on. So this thing only had to be set up for a couple of days. So I attached the face with a glue gun, but also propped on a rock. So hopefully even if the glue gave way, it would have something to sit on. It was a lot of fun. So many people came by to kind of cheer me on, say hello, and film me a couple of times. I appreciate it. Thanks guys for showing your support. And for the rest of the aquascape, I winged it. I had a real clear idea of what I wanted to do, but pretty much I just did what felt right. So out of 6 possible places for this contest, I did not get any. And when I really sat and thought about why I think that is, I know exactly what I need to do in the future. Now, if I decide to do this again, I think several months beforehand, what I'll do is I'll start farming my plants. So if I have like really huge, massive plants that look like they've been grown in for months, I think that is the secret. Like, I tend to plant a little sparsely and let it fill in, but I really need to start the opposite way. Like, I need to make it look like it's been growing for weeks and weeks and weeks. I think that's tougher to do than it sounds, and because I brought some pretty mature plants and stuff, and lots of plants, and it still was just like not even on the same level. Every single aquascape that I saw, with like very few exceptions, was the single most beautiful aquascape I'd ever seen before. Why don't we just take 1 second and just kind of take a quick look across some of my favorite aquascapes from the contest. I'll even include some dance music to make it more entertaining. Yes, really, really incredible tanks. Now, if you want to take a really good look at some of these tanks, my good friend Alex Winchell, who I interviewed, I think 2 years ago at the Big Fish deal, he brought a really nice camera and a rail, and he took some really long, slow pans of these tanks. But it's not to be missed. I'll include a little subscription button for him at the end of this video and a link in the description if you want to check it out. He's the one that provided me with this beautiful, beautiful footage of my tank there at the show. But the show was outrageous. It was crazy. It was a really, really cool thing. I mean, I did not see a terrible tank in the bunch. It was incredible. Now, when I brought this tank home, what I did was I drained the tank down to about here, and I put bubble wrap between all the rocks and the face and everything like that. And I used plastic wrap to cover the top of it just so it wouldn't evaporate too much. I then placed it back in the box, the little shipping box that they were included with, and I just brought it home with the rest of my stuff. Now I made a couple of slight changes with the lights. I didn't want to mount the light that I got. I wanted to use it for something else. So I bought this little LED light. This is a little Nano Light they sell at my store. And I'd seen it on a couple of tanks and thought it was pretty bright and real thin. And I thought it'd be cool to try. It's a pretty standard light. There's not a lot to report on there. It looks to be pretty well constructed. It's got splash protection, that sort of thing. It's got an on-off switch built right onto the wall wart, which is kind of interesting. I don't see that a lot. And of course, it's got the little clips that you can slide onto the rails and attach onto your tank. You can actually attach these. I found that you could attach them either way, and it kind of gives you options for the width of your tank too. It's pretty interesting. The other light I got is this little puck light. Now, I've got that LED strip, but I haven't really figured out a cool way to really mount it. And just to put some light behind there, I had originally bought this to put inside of the big tank, you know, just to have some illumination in there. But I thought that this would be a cool way to light up the eyes. So at least temporarily, I'm doing this to kind of illuminate the eyes from behind. Now, you remember most of the hardscape from the aquascaping haul video I did just a few weeks ago, and a lot of you wondered what that rock looked like wet, and there it is. I got it at abuseplant.com. It's called 1000 Layer Rock, and it's really, really neat. And all the abuse that's on here too, that's from abuseplant.com as well. As far as the rest of the plants that are in here, I've got this parva from my local store the other day, and I decided to include that. That's a plant I really, really like. It grows really slow. I have trouble keeping it well, but I'm going to give it another try in here, and I'm excited for it. I hope it looks really good. Of course, I've got the Monte Carlo. This Monte Carlo has kind of been to hell and back. I mean, the trip there and back really didn't do it any favors, so it's looking a little bit weak right now. But it'll snap back in no time. I've got some dwarf sage here in the back, and eventually what I'm hoping is that it will almost completely obscure the face. The face will still be kind of peeking out, but there'll be those jungle vines and just some eyes looking through. Now for the crown, I've got the Java fern going right now, but I'll probably switch that up with something else soon. I like the Java fern in there, and I think it looks really neat, maybe short term, but I'd like to do a nice little planted, colorful planted headpiece for her at some point. The other thing with it too is it seems to block a whole lot of the light, which makes the eyes really pop, but I want a little bit more light to trickle down onto the plants down here. Now, if you've got a sharp eye, you might have noticed this little tiny fish. This is an Endler's livebearer that I actually found in what remains of the 55 in my garage. Now, this has had a pump going for several weeks, but there's no fish in it as far as I knew. This guy's been in there in the cold with no food for a long time. So I rescued him and threw him into this tank, which, even though it's not perfect, is much better than where he was. And that's it. That's how I set it up. I'll be interested to see this as it grows in. I'll be sure to keep you appraised. But until next time, folks, follow your bliss, keep a clean tank, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye. This video is a little bit longer than normal, so I've included a time code for your convenience. Those lights aren't quite clear. I would click here or here. You can click here or here. There. Done.